Welcome to the Middlesex Moments radio show. I'm Dr. Anna Wasesha, president of Middlesex Community College, and my guest today is Gary Wallace, who's a graduate of Middlesex Community College, class of
2009.
2009? That's really not that long ago.
Not long at all.
Oh, wow. So what did you major in?
Criminal justice.
Oh, perfect. Yes. And so, Gary, why don't you tell us what your role is now with the police and how long you've been with the police in Middletown?
Sure. I'm in my 22nd year, so I'm on the downslide, but I'm in charge of the Investigative Services Division, or AKA the Detective Bureau. So I oversee all the major crimes in Middletown, basically.
And how did tell us a little bit about how you climbed the ladder within the police department? When did you start out as a beat cop?
I did. Yeah. Started out walking the beat on Main Street. Back then, it was 6 months. Right out of the academy, you had to walk the beat. So myself and several other young officers would walk together, and we got to know the neighborhood, we got to know the people, which is what the department really wanted. And then from there, finally got into a car, which was nice, and I worked on my way through the patrol division until I became a school resource officer at Middletown High around my 6th or 7th year. From there, after probably 2 or 3 years in the school system, I was promoted to sergeant, which was nice. I got my first promotion, and I went back to patrol, worked the midnight shift, and then 2 years later, I tested for lieutenant and came out number 1 on the list. And
good.
You're right. Went right up to the bureau and became a supervisor, and 3 years later, became a captain. So I kind of hit the marks pretty well, and throughout those years, I had various positions in internal affairs, records, the bureau, patrol. I was a supervisor in the special investigations unit where I was a school officer, so I got to go back and kind of supervise that unit, and that's pretty much how my career went. So.
Did you go to the academy directly out of high school?
I did not. I first went to Mitchell College in New London right out of high school, and I actually played 2 sports. I played soccer and baseball, but my head was wrapped a little bit more around sports than my studies, so I didn't do too well my first year. After my 2nd year at Mitchell, I decided to join the Navy, and I always had an interest in the military. I had prior family in the military, my brother, my father, my uncles, so I looked at that, and I grew up a little bit, matured, and it was a great experience.
Did you spend 4 years?
I did. I spent 4 years in the Navy. I was on an aircraft carrier during the Persian Gulf War, so I'm a veteran, which was a really excellent experience.
I don't want to date you too much, but the early 1990s?
Yes, I was in from 87 to 91.
Yeah.
I was in the military.
Yeah. So. That was an amazing time.
It was. And we really didn't have, in 87 I should say, we really didn't have an inkling that things were going to happen within the next 3 to 4 years. I know my parents were really worried about it in 1990 when that war broke out. Comparison really is not really comparison to what's going on now. It was very short, it was very direct, but nonetheless it was still a war.
Right, and being in the Navy, I mean, they were massing all the warships in the Mediterranean Sea, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It feels like we're at war. We've been at war all along. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to talk with you on the radio show was because, and this goes to sort of the war at home, right? And so it seems like for the last couple of years, maybe starting with Trayvon Martin, but there's been a long spate of violence in our own cities, and many people having guns and using guns, and it's crested toward a lot of loss of confidence in the police, right? And so because you're here in Middletown, I thought we could talk about what it's like to be in Middletown as a police officer and as the people who maybe trust the police and don't trust the police. But now we have to take a break, so we'll come back after this message and we'll go deep into that topic.
Sounds great.
Thank you. Well, we're back to the Middlesex Moments radio show. Gary Wallace, who is a captain.
Captain with the Middletown Police.
Middletown Police. And I'm really so happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. The topic is just so incredibly important because it has to do with the confidence in the police. And then I can generalize or make that bigger. It's confidence in our major institutions. And so the Gallup poll of 2015 or so, repeated a survey they'd done for about 15 years where they asked people, the randomized sample of people across the country, what is your level of confidence in? And then it was the basic institutions in society, beginning with the presidency, the Congress, the Supreme Court, the banks, government, and police, of course, and colleges and universities were in that list too. And the only place where there continues to be some confidence in these institutions is with small business owners and the military.
Okay.
But there's been this really precipitous decline in confidence in the public institutions that really are the hallmarks of our civilized society.
Agreed.
Police and colleges among them. So as I was starting to say before the break, we've had this sort of continuing strain in our country between the police and the community. And you're a community policing officer advocate, as am I. So
yes.
What's it like in Middletown now? What are we doing about that?
So the kind of tone in Middletown overall I think is pretty good. I am happy with the fact that police officers do interact with the community, but we can always do better. And throughout my career, my 22 years, I have always stressed doing things when nothing is happening. And that really is what builds trust. And when things do happen, people already know their police department, what they're capable of, who they are. They know that certain incidents are isolated, and that's not, when major things happen, if one officer, say, does something and there's a question about it, it isn't indicative of everyone. So doing things when nothing is happening is very important. We have a lot of young officers in Middletown. I would say, if I had to guess, a good 30 to 40% of the department now has, less than 10 years on the job. And they come from all walks of life. The difficult part for us right now is for those of us who have been doing community policing when we were younger officers, how do we transition some of that to the younger generation? As I mentioned before, I would walk the beat for 6 months when I was first, out there on my own, but we don't really do that anymore. So younger officers are getting in brand new cars and they're kind of going off on their own in their districts, and they're handling their calls and they're doing really well. But the community policing aspect is something that I think we need to improve. The one thing I will say that has helped us in Middletown is, and really an unfortunate thing since Sandy Hook, but Mayor Drew has ordered that officers stand post at every school in Middletown morning and afternoon when students come in and when they leave. And it's very costly, I won't lie. It's costs a lot of money in overtime to have officers, either stay over or come in early to do that. But kind of the silver lining in that is that officers are able to talk to kids, talk to parents in that coming and going time, and it has really, really kind of boosted our credibility in the community as far as people getting to know us. So when we talk about that pulse in Middletown and how people really feel about us, it was pretty evident when some of these shootings were happening around the country involving police, and we had very overwhelming support from the community during that time. People would hug us in the street. They would bring things into the police department for us to eat. They would send us letters. Tons of us were getting emails and phone calls, saying, hey, we support you. But I'm not naive, because I know that there are other sections of the community that don't feel that way. And although it's great to have that support from a lot of the community, I am also interested in those who don't support us in that way. We cannot forget about them. We still need to do the work that we need to do to gain their trust. And that's really where our work needs to be focused.
One of the, I was telling you earlier that at the Democratic National Convention, the Dallas police officer said the only way to serve the community is to know the community. And that goes to that walking the beat, and even if you're driving around in a car, having your window rolled down and knowing the names of the people you see on the street. Another thing that I heard across that period of time, this was after the, my hometown, St. Paul, Minnesota, there was a police officer who stopped a guy for a traffic violation of some kind and ended up shooting him. And his partner, who was in the passenger seat of the car, used her iPhone to video the incident, and that went viral.
I saw that.
Yeah, and then of course there was the Dallas shooting where the guy with the assault rifle, who was a lone assailant, took out several police officers at what had been a Black Lives Matter demonstration that had been peaceful to that point. Mm-hmm. So it was the police chief from Milwaukee, which now is experiencing strife itself. He said something that also resonated for me as a school person, which is the police department is now expected to solve not just the crime, not just to keep the streets safe from the criminals and the cops and robbers kind of idea of police, but to solve the family breakdown, the hunger, the homelessness, the driftlessness, children estranged from their families, truancy, all that. So it's like all of society's problems are now being delivered to the police. I would say probably all school teachers in America feel like they're in the classroom and they're trying to do their best to teach people. But they also, you got to recognize that all these children have real lives,
Sure.
real rounded 360-degree lives. And they bring those issues into the classroom, and sometimes if you don't address them, for example, if they're hungry, you're never going to be able to be successful teaching. So do you have the sense that the police in this city of Middletown are also kind of like trying to solve society's ills?
I do, in a sense. That's a really good point, and it isn't something that is new to us. For as long as I can remember, we have always been kind of the hub of all those issues, and we need to know what resources are out there to be able to direct, people to. So, yes, any officer out there that's in patrol can come across, a ton of different issues, and will have to be able to figure out what happened, why it happened, and in addition to that, figure out what kind of help does that family really need. It's very important that officers know the resources in their community, and I see more and more collaborations happening in Middletown because people like you and I are dealing with the same population, and yet we aren't talking. So when we form these collaborations and we pick people to sit around the table, we're able to share that information and say, okay, when something happens, can I direct them this way or can I direct them that way? As far as the police, I think a lot of the mistrust and animosity toward us might come from some of the interactions from time to time when we are trying to do our job. And for instance, a domestic violence situation, if we have to arrest a mom or a dad, children see that and they see it as the police are taking mom and dad away. They're not understanding the root of the problem and what needs to be fixed. But again, we're the ones that are there on scene. We're the ones that have to handle that. And once we walk out of the door, if we don't have all the answers, if we don't direct all the resources, then certainly we look like bad people. But our job is to keep people safe first and then try to help in another way later. So when I mentioned those 30-40% new officers, these are the types of things that they're learning, they're doing very well at, but we always need to keep in mind that there are underlying issues that we need to deal with. So I totally agree with you.
So I know that you are on a board, or you may still be on the board of the Gilead organization, and I was at one of their meetings where you talked about collaboration between, so if somebody ends up in the emergency room or is picked up by the police, that a number of agencies are communicating about these individuals to try to organize it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And we also have something where the Middlesex Community College is on a sort of a town-wide committee. Tell me about that. That will try to address. Is there an emergency response or?
I'm trying to think the name of it. It is because the police are not on it. I think because of confidentiality with the clients that they're dealing with. I'm sorry, I can't think of the name of the collaboration, but also on the Gilead board is one of your own,
yes.
Kim Hogan. Yes, and she's
right.
wonderful.
Yeah.
We do try to be as helpful as possible with the collaborations because, like I said, we're all dealing with that same clientele. I wish I could remember the name of the organization you're talking about with the collaboration because they do seek out people who are, chronically going to the ER, have substance abuse issues, mental health issues.
Mental health issues are big,
and
yeah.
As I said, the police aren't on that board because of the medical reasons or issues that they have to talk about, and the person would have to sign a release for us to know, and they really don't want that. And I understand.
I understand too, but that's one of the kind of inhibitors. So we have to work around, do the best we can to kind of follow those rules, but also try to help the people, and then in the end help the community. So not too long ago, you had a meeting at the Community Health Center about community issues with the police. So what were as you reflect back on that meeting, what were the issues that people were raising with you?
So basically, what I wanted to do was first of all, we brought in a facilitator from New York. Her name's Yvette Strong, and she and I are in another organization together called the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. The acronym is NOBLE. She's certified to train in that area. So I had her come up and talk about the law in your community, which is a curriculum that talks about what to do if you're stopped or detained by the police. It talks about federal, local, state laws, what your rights are. So we did that first, and then we had a panel discussion afterwards to kind of talk about that and talk about some of the things that we've really just been talking about now.
And now we have, I'm afraid we have to take a break. This is,
Okay.
it happens just reliably every few minutes or so. So we'll take a break and then we'll come back to the issues that you heard
Okay.
at that meeting.
Thank you.
Well, welcome back to Middlesex Mums Radio Show. And Gary Wallace, and I'm Anna Wasesha, and Gary's on the police department here at Middletown, and I'm the president of the college, and we have a lot in common. We're dealing with the same people. This is our community. We want to know our community and serve it well. And we want the quality of life to be really high in Middletown and in the surrounding areas, and we want people to feel safe and good about where they live.
Sure.
We have that all in common. So when you had this meeting
Yes.
at the Community Health Center, what were the issues that you heard?
So some of the issues that we heard were, why doesn't our police department kind of reflect the community? Like, why aren't we hiring more minorities? And that's such a difficult question. And as a minority, I understand kind of all the angles about it. Part of it is getting people to actually apply. So if anybody out there is interested in being a Middletown police officer, please do. But part of it is getting minorities to apply for the job. And don't get me wrong, minorities apply for it, but it might not necessarily be in an overwhelming amount in Middletown. People want to work where possibly they feel more comfortable. Maybe if they go to a city that's a little bit more urban than Middletown, they might find more officers already working there and say, oh yeah, that's where I want to work. Could be part of it, I'm just speculating. Another part of the process is actually getting them through. And when we look at a department like Middletown, where we have, a few minority, when people do apply, it's a little bit harder to get them through the process. African Americans, Hispanics, minorities, I think it's safe to say that they view the world a little bit differently. And so when they're testing, whether it be written or whether it be an oral board panel, their answers don't come across quite the same as the person on the other side of the table. So we have a certain standard and we have set questions and we know what we want to hear from that person. But if your experiences in life are a little bit different, I don't know that that's being interpreted, in a certain way when it comes to the person that's, doing the processing. So it's difficult to get people through the process. Then once you get them through the process and we actually hire them, then there's the academy and there's the training and all the things that go through it. So a lot of times people will apply to Middletown or other towns demographically like us if they don't make it through the process or they don't score high enough. I'm not saying they fail, but if they don't score high enough to be chosen, they choose other towns or they pick other avenues because they really want the job and they'd be good, but sometimes not what a certain department's looking for. So it's very detailed, and that's just an overview. It's a very detailed process.
And here again we have similarities. Why are our faculty not reflective of the racial makeup and the diverse makeup of our students? And some of that is also it takes time. It takes
Yes.
time to make those kinds of changes. And I will just reflect momentarily on the Olympics. There were so many women athletes who competed, and people regularly were reflecting on the fact that because Title IX happened in 1972, so that was like almost 50 years ago, women were allowed to play collegiate sports, and they were, and then they ultimately, here we go, fast forward 50 years, they're winning in the Olympics. And it takes time to change cultures, and I think we just have to do our very best to be really adamant about trying to do that because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I talk to the chief on a regular basis. We have our weekly staff meetings. We don't always talk about the hiring process, but he has expressed an interest in diversifying the department, as has the mayor. So that's a good thing when you have your top leaders who are interested in that. The problem is really getting people to the table. So we've reached out throughout Middletown. We would love to have Middletown residents. We'd love for them to be minorities to help with some of the things that officers are going through in the community. It's great to have homegrown, but it is just a little difficult getting them to the table. So we're going to try to do better with that. And I think when we are a little bit more reflective of the community, like you said, I think that will prove positive when officers are out there doing their job. And like I said, officers who are out there now are doing a great job. When a citizen opens their door and possibly sees someone who looks like them, sometimes they feel a little bit more comfortable with whatever the situation is. And I think that's the whole point of diversification.
Mm-hmm. There's certainly the language issue too. I mean, I can't
Yes.
imagine the breadth of issues that the Middletown Police confront whenever they come one-to-one with a citizen. But
Yeah.
even communicating in a language would be an issue you'd have to deal with. And and it's not an easy job, you would say.
Oh, it's definitely not an
Yeah.
easy job.
It's physically arduous. It's dangerous.
Yes, at all times, on and off the job.
And you have to know about the law. I will say we're offering a course here at the college, Introduction to Law, but people don't know all the laws. Whatever the federal laws, the state laws, the local municipal laws, whatever they happen to be. I mean, so there's a lot to know, right?
There is a lot to know, and that was one of the things that we talked about in the forum a couple of weeks ago at the health center, was the law in your community, and a part of that is learning about local, state, and federal law and what that means for you as a citizen. It's important for people to know what their rights are. You can't just trust that whoever is stopping you or whoever is talking to you is going to do the right thing. We hope as the police that our officers are always doing the right thing, but to empower citizens to know what their rights are it doesn't get any better than that.
Were there other issues that you recall that arose from that community meeting? And you were also, if you were thinking about doing another meeting, right? So obviously there must have been enough material that you needed another session.
Very good response from folks. We are talking about a second or possibly third session. One of the things I do remember a gentleman speaking about was in the minority community, there really isn't, and this is specifically to Middletown, there really isn't a leader. And so when he said that and then started to speak about it, I really kind of looked up and I thought about it and said, wow, what is he getting at? So his point was that with any great movement, in a positive way, there's always a leader. There's always somebody that people can turn to, rely on, who spearheads it, who is kind of the one voice that everybody kind of follows. And older gentleman, had been around in the community a very long time and knew a lot of people. And so it was interesting for him to say that. That was another kind of thing that came up that people spoke back and forth about is, who are the real leaders in this community and what are those leaders doing? Are they kind of going off in their own directions and taking care of just a few people here, or are they really getting together and talking about issues and trying to solve them?
I mean, I would totally agree. I mean, I think we have a real issue with leaders in our country, and the current presidential election is a demonstration of that. But we don't like our leaders. Leaders get knocked off their perch pretty quickly if you find an Achilles heel.
Yeah.
All leaders are human beings, just like we are. They all have clay feet. But yeah, where's Martin Luther King? Where's Robert F. Kennedy? We don't have people who inspire us to our better selves.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's the issue. And even in local communities, you need those. Yeah. So what do you think you'd cover in another session?
Well, I would love to bring that curriculum back, the law in your community. I thought it was really great. People were very receptive to it, so we would probably do that again, just because if we're going to take it to another venue like a Middlesex Community College or another place, we'd probably have a whole different set of people who need to hear that presentation. What I would like to focus more on, which we kind of slipped away from during the conversations because we did talk a lot about the police, is education. And I specifically engineered it so that I had a director from Wesleyan. I also had a couple of people who worked in the school system. I wanted them on the panel because education is always the key. What and how our students are learning is very important to their upbringing. And that upbringing, when it comes to bringing a police officer and a person together in an event, their education and what they know and what they learn and how they learn really sets the tone almost as to how that interaction is going to go, absent the police officer being professional. And so I thought that was very important, and I tried a couple times with questions to kind of rope that in and show people that this panel is the way it is because there are many things that lead up to that interaction, and we need to understand that education is a really huge part of it. So education will be one of the things that I would like to focus on if we do this again.
Yeah, I mean, you're obviously preaching to the choir. But in my world, we have a thing called Constitution Day. I frankly don't know if the K-12 schools have it, but in the higher education community, there was a senator, Robert Byrd, who said, if you're going to get federal funds, and we all get federal funds, you have to dedicate one day out of the year to the Constitution. You can do whatever you want, but I want you to talk about the Constitution. He always carried a copy of the Constitution in his breast pocket. Again, we're in this political silly season. It's not that silly this time around. And I think that one day on the Constitution is not enough. Just like, we should be teaching courses. Everybody should know what the U.S. Constitution says, because that would be a frame that somebody would bring if they were encountering a police officer at a traffic stop or whatever.
Right.
And the same is true for the laws. We don't, these are things that we don't absorb through our skin. I mean, you have to know about these things. So this is a place where education needs to step up, I think, and do a better job. Ultimately, and again, because it's the election season, because people then go pull the lever or fill in the dot or push the chat or whatever they're doing and at their local precinct. But people are voting for their leaders, flawed as they may be, and they need to know what the issues are underneath whatever the person's personality is.
Absolutely.
It can't become a personality test. So we have a lot of work to do in that regard. It's been just wonderful to see you today.
Great to see you too. I wish we had more time.
I do too, and I'm so glad you're on the Middletown Police Department.
Thank you.
I mean, the college feels as though we have a friend in you, and we have an alum, so that's even better. And there are probably other alums on the police force in Middletown. But I would just say to you, you come to the campus for events. People know you. You sit on our committees. You help us out because we have issues that we have to address. All of our faculty and staff are mandatory reporters, for example. So if they see something, they have to say something. They have to know how to say something, what to do about it. You've helped us out immeasurably. So, you're my favorite policeman.
Oh, thank you. I always love coming back to Middlesex, so I'm home here.
Yeah,
I love it.
Thanks so much. Well, so to the listening audience, I hope you get to know the police in Middletown. They're on your side. And so is this community college. And if you want to know more about us, you can check us out at MxCC.edu on the World Wide Web. And I'm guessing that the Middletown Police Department could be located on the World Wide Web too. Is that the case?
That is the case. We are physically at 222 Main Street, but it's cityofmiddletown.com, and then just click on the link for departments and you can find the police department right there.
So if you got a question, go there first and then pick up the phone and call somebody and they'll help you out. So thanks so much for listening to the show today. This is Anna Wasesha, and I'm wishing you all a very good day.